Having a Pokémon opinion is a very dangerous thing. Pokémon is a series with a very long history, and it has accumulated a gigantic fanbase that stretches across multiple generations. Both of these things combined equate to a fanbase where, like a lot of other Nintendo series such as Zelda, everyone's idea of what a Pokémon game should be is different. This means that if you dare flex your First Amendment rights on the topic of Pokémon, there will surely be punishment. No matter what kind of opinion you give, there is likely to be a group of neckbeards who care way too much about other people's video game opinions ready to ambush you. Pokémon Black and White are my favorite Pokémon games, and they were also the most controversial Pokémon games up to that point in time. Pokémon has always been criticized for being too formulaic, and these criticisms could be seen as far back as Generation 3 and slowly got worse over time. The formula in Gen 5 is still 100% intact, but there were some very notable twists to the formula that didn't sit right with some fans. It's so weird to look back on considering how different things are now with the push to open world. What we may look back on now as insignificant little changes made people uncomfortable because Pokemon did something it had never done before. Pokemon actually tried to be different, and being different is always going to lead to some controversy. I will say, liking these games has become less and less controversial as the years go on, since people that grew up with the game have started to feel nostalgic over it and realized its genius. With that being said, even the least controversial Pokemon opinion can lead to broken bones and your internal organs experiencing fresh air for the first time. Against my better judgment, I'm excited to share with you some Pokemon opinions. More specifically, not only my opinions on what are my favorite Pokemon games, but also some of my favorite games of all time. I used to rent these guys from Family Video all the time as a kid before I eventually just saved up enough money to buy the damn game. They're not my first Pokemon games. I played Leaf Green and Sapphire before them, but they're still childhood Pokemon games and I have a ton of nostalgia for them. Also, before I start yapping, you're probably not going to hear anything about Black and White 2 in this video, since I want to save all my thoughts for that for a later video down the line. So if at any point it sounds like I'm completely ignoring its existence, it's because I am for the time being. Anyway, let's talk about Pokemon Black and White. Starting things off, the Unova region has some of my favorite Pokemon designs of any region. The way Pokemon Black and White handled the Pokemon is infamously very different than any other games in the series. Instead of meeting a mix of old and new Pokemon throughout the main adventure, Pokemon Black and White only has brand new Generation 5 Pokemon. This was the biggest point of controversy in Pokemon Black and White. Nostalgia is a very big aspect of the series. Many people have favorites from the games that they played as kids and always want to be able to have them on their team. The idea of being forced to only use new Pokemon was considered insane by many. Here's the thing though, as someone who only uses new Pokemon whenever I pick up a new game, this change worked so well for me. Not only would I be playing the game in a way that I had already been doing anyway, it also meant that I would get to see nothing but new Pokemon, which does a lot to make a game feel fresh despite sticking to the Pokemon formula. Also, in order for there to still be a lot of diversity in the Pokemon you encounter, the game needed to bring in the most new Pokemon of any Pokemon game, coming in at 156. One of my biggest complaints in later entries like X and Y and Sun and Moon is how infrequently it seems like you run into new Pokemon. Those games only have like 60 to 80 new Pokemon, so that meant that sometimes you would only see like 1 or 2 new Pokemon per route. There are even some cases where the newer Pokemon would have a lower encounter rate than the older ones. It's also really lame going to some of the gym leaders and they literally only have like 1 new Pokemon. One of my favorite parts of a new Pokemon game is getting to meet all the new Pokemon in their region, so when it feels like meeting a new Pokemon is super rare, it makes me feel sad inside. With Pokemon Black and White on the other hand, all the routes are filled with nothing but brand new Pokemon, so it's just so exciting to me. Even playing this game today when I'm already super familiar with the Unova Pokemon, seeing only the Unova Pokemon gives these games a super unique feel. The gym leaders, rivals, evil team, and everyone else use nothing but new Pokemon, so it made it even more exciting to battle them and see their teams. It also adds to the challenge of these games because you're not fighting Pokemon you've already fought hundreds of times before. Like, imagine if Elisa sent out a Magneton just like past electric gym leaders. You know that it has a steel-electric dual typing if it wasn't already obvious, and you know it doesn't have the ability to levitate even though it looks like it probably does. You already know how to deal with it. Just have your Sandile or Drillbur use Dig and erase it from her team. Imagine if one of your rivals had a Golem on their team. On top of already knowing its strengths and weaknesses, you've already seen it many times over the course of a decade. Listen, I love Golem, but why not give your rival a Gigalith instead and make it feel more fresh? Many will say the downside of having to create so many new Pokemon is that the overall quality of the designs will go down, but these are actually some of my favorite designs in the series. 2 of my favorite Pokemon of all time come from Unova, being Zoroark and Genesect. The starter Pokemon, as well as their evolutions, are one of those rare cases where I like every single one of them. These days the Oshawott line is my favorite, but I like doing playthroughs with each one of them because all their designs are cool. The best part is that only one of the final evolutions is bipedal, and none of them look too humanoid for me. Even Embor. Listen, I totally understand why people are getting sick of hearing people complain about that because it seems like such a tiny, insignificant issue, but I personally prefer when most starters look like creatures instead of people. The box legendaries are also amazing. I love both of them, and just barely prefer Reshiram over Zekrom. Unova famously also has some of the best bug-type Pokemon of any region, and bug-type is actually one of my favorite Pokemon types because of that. I can't really explain it, I just like the designs. Leavanny, Scolipede, Volcarona, Galvantula, Genesect, goddamn Crustle. Look at all these guys, they're great! There are some Pokemon that come from Unova that have basically become the poster child for hating on modern Pokemon designs. There are two in particular that seem to get a lot of extra hate. And I know you and I are both currently thinking of the same Pokemon. The Trubbish line and the Vanillish line are the most commonly used punching bags when it comes to bitching about modern Pokemon designs. It's just an ice cream cone. It's a literal pile of garbage. Take me back to when we had piles of sludge instead. I love Muck, by the way. If I had to guess, the reason most people hate the Unova designs is just because they were forced to use them instead of getting to ignore them and just put a Lapras or Snorlax or Swalot or whatever people use on their team for the 18 billionth time. For other people though, people were able to open their minds and make new favorites. Overall, I would say Gen 5 designs definitely stand out more compared to any past or future generations. Something about their designs has always just felt different to me. I don't know if anyone else has felt that. Every generation has their own specific vibe, but for whatever reason, Unova Pokemon just feel more unique, and I really like that about them. It could just be nostalgia, I don't really know. It's not just the Pokemon that were new, of course. There were all sorts of other new things about Pokemon Black and White. Some of the changes stuck around, while others are totally unique to these games. One of the biggest ones for me is the change that was made to TMs. Instead of being single-use items like in past games, TMs could now be used infinitely, a change that would drastically change team building. I'm not really sure what the general consensus of this change was. I definitely liked it, and it seemed like a pretty positive change, but I could imagine some people seeing it as making the game too easy. Moves like Earthquake are crazy powerful, so we're just gonna be able to use the Earthquake TM and teach it to our Pokemon as many times as we want? Won't that break the game? I don't see it this way. I see this change as only a good thing. Though it could break the game if done incorrectly, there is a pretty easy solution. Simply make the stronger TMs harder to get, whether it be through exploration or saving them for later post-game, and this is exactly what's done in Black and White. I never thought infinite use TMs made the game too easy. This was still back during the time when Pokemon games still presented a challenge, so the TM change was never the issue. It's just so much more convenient not having to worry about wasting a TM on a Pokemon you may end up boxing, or just realize later that they don't need the move anymore and someone else on your team could have used it. It simply makes team building more fun because you can always teach your team the exact moves they need without compromising challenge. It's absolutely perfect. Another big new change is the addition of seasons. This is something that to this day is exclusive to Generation 5. Basically, the seasons would rotate on a monthly basis depending on the real world month. So it would start off as spring in January, then switch to summer in February, and just keep rotating from there. As you would expect, certain things in-game were affected by the current season. The sunrise and sunset were different, the world would have a different aesthetic, and a new Pokemon line was introduced whose concept revolved around the changing seasons being Deerling and Sawsbuck. Sawsbuck in particular goes through drastic changes depending on the season, which is super cool. My only complaint with the seasons is that I feel like they can drag on a little too long. On the surface, having them change every month sounds like the right move, but considering the fact that it's going to take the vast majority of people less than a month to complete this game, it likely means you're only going to experience one season over the course of your entire adventure, unless you start your playthrough towards the end of the month. I'm not exactly sure what a better cycle would be, but I do know that 1 month per season is too long for my liking. A new feature that I remember being pretty heavily marketed is triple and rotation battles. This felt like it was always inevitable. We already had double battles, so it seems natural we'd eventually get triple battles because more equals better or something like that. I'm gonna be blunt, I never really gave a shit about double battles. I encountered them so infrequently in other games, and when you're just fighting easy NPCs, there isn't enough additional strategy involved to make them interesting. When I indulged in my first triple battle, I somehow managed to care even less. I mean, if double battles weren't my cup of tea, what would you expect my reaction to triple battles to be? It's kinda interesting because the Pokemon on either end can attack the opponents on the opposite end, while the middle Pokemon can attack all the Pokemon, but overall, I'm a basic single battle type of guy. Rotation battles are a bit more interesting since only the middle Pokemon can attack and you can rotate your Pokemon to the middle every turn and attack on the same turn. But again, I never find myself getting too pumped when I encounter them, so it's one of those things I just chalk up to, it's not my thing. I like my Pokemon battles to be like my battles with my dad as a kid. 1v1. Okay, this next section is probably going to be long as hell because we're going to be talking about Pokemon Black and White's story. To put it plainly, I do not typically play Pokemon games because of their story. I'm not expecting to be sitting on the edge of my seat every time the villain is on screen, or get super emotionally invested in the characters and their arcs, if they even have one in the first place. If I'm having a conversation with Charon and he just straight up gets fucking sniped and bleeds out in my arms, my honest reaction is going to be... Okay, that's a little dramatic, because these games actually did get me to care about the characters. But like pretty much all the other Nintendo games I play, I'm here for the gameplay first, and the story is like the fun seasoning that can help entries stand out a little more than other entries in the series. Even though the story isn't the #1 reason I play Pokemon, it's still something I care about a lot, and I want it to be engaging. There's going to be a lot of text to sift through after all, so I want it to be entertaining. In the case of Pokemon Black and White, this is my favorite story in the entire series. The story is incredibly interesting and has many layers, while still managing to be non-intrusive with no agonizingly long cutscenes. Also, all the characters are fun and get me excited to watch their stories unfold, and the villains have clear and interesting goals and can be quite unsettling. The theme of the story is truths and ideals. It's about understanding different people's points of view and learning to live beside them. You'll see these themes pop up, not just in the main story, but in the individual character arcs. There's so much to talk about here. Let's talk about the rivals first. Charon and Bianca aren't the piece of shit rivals that I love from the early games that motivate me to get better, and yet they still manage to be some of my favorite rivals in the series, and they're definitely my favorite friendly rivals by a landslide. Charon's personality feels different compared to other rivals. I like how cold and calculated his approach to Pokemon battles is. When he loses, he's not all like, "Oh golly gee shucks, you got me again, Aaron. I'll definitely get you next time, just you wait. Since you beat me, you can bang my wife if you want. I'll even watch." He's always carefully analyzing how he can get better, and he actually chooses the starter that has a type advantage over yours, which I will always appreciate in a rival. I remember as a kid being kind of annoyed with Charon's know-it-all personality, but having played these games millions of times at this point, and also not being a dumb kid anymore and can actually appreciate character arcs, he's pretty far up there in terms of my favorite rivals. He never comes out and says it, but you can tell he sort of views his Pokemon more as tools rather than partners or teammates. He has one of the more interesting realizing the importance of trainer-Pokemon bond arcs that we see quite often in the series. His goal is to be the champion because he wants to be the strongest trainer, but he doesn't know why. When he's confronted on why exactly he's pursuing strength by the current champion, he doesn't have a clear answer and gets pretty defensive. This truly ignites his journey of self-discovery. There's of course nothing wrong with wanting to be the very best that no one ever was, but without an actual reason other than being strong for the sake of being strong, it messes with his head pretty bad. It's really surreal watching your usually calm and collected friend just fall apart as he tries to figure out why he's even doing what he's doing in the first place. It's super interesting to watch. And then there's Bianca. Bianca is your other rival, and is the complete opposite of Charon. She's bright-eyed and cheery, but also clumsy and unsure of herself. She goes through her own journey of self-discovery that's quite a bit different from Charon's. Charon's arc is one that asks why he's doing what he's doing, while Bianca's asks what. She doesn't even know what she wants to do in the first place. At the beginning of your journey, she says she wants to become a strong trainer, but this falls apart quickly and she faces the brutal truth that being a strong trainer isn't for everyone. It's honestly pretty heartbreaking, and it's one of the more depressing storylines in a Pokemon game in my opinion. At the beginning of the game, you go to Bianca's house to find her dad yelling at her for wanting to go on a journey because he thinks she can't handle it. So it's kinda depressing watching her struggle because you're like, wow, is her piece of shit dad actually right? Although she doesn't become particularly strong, she's still able to enjoy her journey because of the bond with her Pokemon, her friends by her side, and the power of friendship or something, I don't really know. What I do know is that Team Plasma is a pretty damn cool evil team. Team Plasma's objective is to liberate all Pokemon from their trainers because they are convinced that all Pokemon are unhappy and must be set free in the wild where they belong. You see them going from town to town trying to spread their message to the townspeople, and it always gave off this eerie vibe that I've always loved. It straight up feels like a cult. Team Plasma confronts an idea that's kind of been a joke in the Pokemon community for a long time. Yeah, it does seem a little strange that we basically jump Pokemon in their natural habitat, kidnap them, and force them to battle for us as a hobby. Some of my favorite types of villains are the ones that have good intentions, but do crazy things to achieve their goals. This could be because their thought process is horribly flawed, or maybe they make the main character and audience go, "Oh shit, are we the bad guys?" In Team Plasma's case, it's a little bit of both. What they're saying makes a lot of sense on the surface, but the deeper you go, a lot of questions are raised. Pokemon are mostly very intelligent and capable creatures. If they don't like battling and being with their trainer, why don't they just leave on their own? If Team Plasma forces everyone to release their Pokemon, what's stopping the Pokemon from just coming right back to their trainer? They raise a valid concern, but their arguments fall apart the more you think about it. It's also funny to witness the hypocrisy as they try to spread their message. Like, they are hell-bent on convincing you that you're hurting your own Pokemon, so they challenge you to a battle, attempt to mug your Pokemon with their Legion of Patrats, the Pokemon that they themselves enslaved, and try to get you to release your Pokemon so they won't be hurt anymore. This does kinda make sense though, because like, how else are you gonna have the power to get people to release their Pokemon other than fighting fire with fire? But I still think the irony is beautiful. There's also the instance after you see their speech for the first time on how we're disgusting people for abusing our Pokemon, and then not even 30 minutes go by and you find them beating the shit out of a wild Munna. God, I love these guys, they're great. Team Plasma's ideology stemmed from their king, N. N grew up with Pokemon that had been mistreated by their trainers as his only friends. His time with them gave him the unique ability to understand what Pokemon are saying, but being with the abused Pokemon is also the source of his philosophy on Pokemon liberation. N has a very unique role in the Pokemon series because he doesn't fall perfectly into one cookie-cutter Pokemon stereotype. He simultaneously serves as a rival, evil team leader, and kind of becomes champion at the end, I think. I always considered N a champion as a kid, but these days, I honestly have no idea if he's officially recognized as one. At the end of the game, he beats Alder, who is your standard champion throughout the story, which makes him the new strongest trainer in Unova, so that should technically make him champion, right? The problem is, even though I think it's implied that he faced the Elite Four to get to Alder, I don't remember seeing any mention of him obtaining the gym badges. If there is, let me know because I must have missed it. If he didn't get the badges, I don't think he can officially be recognized as champion because he didn't go through the process legitimately. Then there's also the possibility that there's no mention of him getting the badges because him making it to the Pokemon League in the first place is supposed to imply that he got the badges. But N is also basically the leader of a terrorist organization, so I wouldn't put it past him to just fly over the badge gates on the legendary Pokemon and bust into the Pokemon League without getting the badges. I personally always considered him a champion for a long time, but I noticed there's a lot of conflicting opinions online, so I don't know. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on it. Regardless, you fight him at the end of the game after he becomes the new strongest trainer in Unova, so he's a lot like Blue in the Kanto games where the final boss is also your rival, but with N being an evil team leader on top of that, it makes it even cooler. I'm not gonna lie, I was kinda creeped out by N as a kid. He's always just lurking around and he's got that creepy music that plays whenever he's on screen. I remember this part in particular where he's kinda just standing outside the Mestralton City gym waiting for you, and as a kid I was like, whoa! Did anyone else get jump scared by that? No? Okay. So yeah, this guy hates the idea of people having Pokemon and especially using them for battle. You do battle with him over the course of the story though, and there's this neat little detail that he only uses the Pokemon found in the location you find him in. The idea is that he just catches the Pokemon then immediately releases them when the battle is done. This is a great little detail because it shows that the devs are very mindful of the story and are trying their best to keep the gameplay consistent with the character. It is kinda weird though that a guy with these philosophies is battling at all, but again, it's the whole fighting fire with fire thing. They don't mention guns too often in the Pokemon world, so how else are you supposed to fight against people that have Pokemon on their side? At some point in the story, he reveals that he wants to befriend one of the legendary Pokemon because he realizes that words are not enough, and he needs to force the world to conform to his way of thinking by brute force. It's a plot point that fits perfectly with the game's themes of truths, ideals, and accepting other people's points of view. Of course the evil team of this game that mostly utilizes words and propaganda would eventually be like, screw it, if they don't want to agree with us, we'll just force them to, because we're evil. Everyone's way of thinking is wrong except for ours. Its themes are a little heavy-handed at times, but Pokemon is supposed to be a game for everyone at the end of the day. It needs to have enough layers for older people to enjoy, but also be digestible for children. And then there's Getsus, the man who is the true puppet master of Team Plasma. He raised N as a child and brainwashed him into thinking that Pokemon are miserable so that he could make him the king of Team Plasma. But Getsus has been the true leader this entire time. He wants everyone to release their Pokemon, not because he thinks it's the morally correct thing to do, but because he wants to be the only one using Pokemon to be the most powerful person and rule the world. Even as a kid, I never really understood this because even if everyone does release their Pokemon and he becomes the most powerful trainer, can't everyone start catching Pokemon again after they realize what he's really been doing and then fight back? Like, he'd definitely be the strongest trainer for a brief period of time, but I feel like it wouldn't take long for people to start assembling teams again and end his reign of terror. Maybe I'm not looking deep enough into his plan. There could be more to it, like making Pokeball manufacturing and selling illegal to keep people from taking back control, but even then I feel like there'd be a lot of leftover Pokeballs lying around for people to use. I don't know, I'd love to hear your ideas on it because I genuinely don't know. This seems like a really shitty plan. It's honestly kind of disappointing to see the whole bad guys with good intentions but are misguided things get thrown to the side in favor of the Puppet Master stepping up and being like, I want to take over the world! But it doesn't ruin the story or anything. At the end of the day, N was genuinely trying to liberate Pokemon for their own well-being, and that's what Team Plasma is built around. Was anyone else terrified of Getsus as a kid? That music that kicks on whenever he was on screen always gave me goosebumps. He was always so menacing and ominous to me. Okay, I know you guys probably think I'm a giant pussy for getting scared by characters in a family-friendly game, but you need to keep two things in mind. One, I was a kid. And two, I grew up on Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, so I've seen some things that I was not supposed to see. I only stayed up for 3 nights straight after watching the 5th episode. I'm tough, I swear! The Shadow Triad is also terrifying, holy shit. These guys are servants of Getsus and have the ability to basically turn invisible and will just appear out of thin air over the course of the story. There's this part where you're talking to N in Chargestone Cave, and he basically admits that the Shadow Triad have been stalking you and your friends over the course of your journey. I wasn't the type to get easily scared as a kid, but for whatever reason, some of these Team Plasma guys really creep me out. But I absolutely loved it though. It was awesome to have villains in a Pokemon game that were actually kind of unsettling. There's this part in the game where you're walking out of the 7th gym with your friends waiting for you, and the gym leader Bryson is like, "Who are you?" And Bianca and Sharon think he's talking to them, but then he's like, "I know you're there, show yourself!" And then the Shadow Triad reveals themselves, and that part always had me kicking my feet as a kid. I just thought it was so cool. Every time I see this scene, I'm like, damn. Dude, the gym leaders in this game are so cool. At the very first gym, there are 3 different gym leaders, and you have to fight the one that counters the starter you chose. So then of course you go pick up the elemental monkey that counters that counter, and then box it for the rest of the game, because why would you ever have an elemental monkey on your team? The second gym leader, Lenora, is almost always a challenge if you didn't pick Tepig, which evolves into a fire fighting type. Her Herdier has Takedown, which hits quite hard, and once it's defeated, she sends out her Watchog and immediately follows up with Retaliate, which has double the power when their other Pokemon was knocked out in the turn before. It also has Hypnosis, which is also going to give you a rough time. She's not one of the hardest gym leaders ever or anything, especially since you can pick up a Timber on the route next to Nacrene City, but she'll make you work for that badge. Berg, on the other hand, doesn't really present much of a challenge. He sometimes gave me trouble because his Leavanny would mess up my Duat, but once you realize you can pick up a Darumaka on the route directly above Castelia City, he's pretty much done for. I really like Berg though, simply because he showcases the bugs of Unova. Pretty much every Pokemon game prior to the 3D games has that one gym leader that makes you just kinda, you know. That gym leader in Black and White has always been Elisa for me. Unlike most gym leaders, there isn't an obvious Pokemon you can pick up on a nearby route to sweep her team. Sure, there's a desert directly south of Nimbasa City where you can pick up the ground-type Sandile, but she has 2 Amalga on her team which are immune to ground-type attacks because they're both flying types. Whenever I had Sandile on my team, I usually just spam Bite until they die, but then they would just get paralyzed because of their static ability. Welcome to the real world, kid, everything sucks! She also has a Zebstrika, which is the star of her team and is pretty powerful, but if you level up a Sandile or Drillbur enough, it shouldn't be too hard, especially since I believe you can pick up the TM Dig on the route before. Clay is the 5th gym leader and utilizes ground types, and he is probably my favorite gym leader in the entire game. I love his gruff and tough cowboy personality and his southern drawl. It's all just great. He never posed much of a challenge, but I always had fun with his gym battle. Clay is just a really cool guy. Skyla is a flying type aficionado. Again, not too much of a challenge, but I remember struggling with her quite a lot as a kid when Tepig was my starter of choice, and I would just train exclusively my Emboar. Bryson, the Ice-type user, is number 7, and he is by far the easiest gym leader in the game. My Darmanitan absolutely leveled that place. I'm pretty sure Fire Punch one-shotted every single Pokemon there. Lastly is the Dragon user, Drayden. He can be pretty tricky because Fairy types weren't introduced yet, and his Haxorus is pretty formidable. I usually just give my Samurott Blizzard, so in the end it isn't too much trouble. The gym leaders are all fine and dandy, but the best part about them in Black and White is that they are actually relevant to the story. In most other Pokemon games, gym leaders just sit in their gyms waiting to be challenged, and that's it. It makes these NPCs feel like NPCs. Black and White is different in that regard. Every single gym leader has a part to play in the story. Well, maybe not really the ones at the first gym, but 7 out of the 8 have a part to play. Even Bryson, who has one of the smallest roles out of all of them, has that awesome scene where he sniffs out the Shadow Triad and helps out when Team Plasma invades Dragon Spiral Tower. Every gym leader is seen outside of their gym interacting with the world as they contribute to the story at some point. And that genuinely has such a big impact when it comes to making them feel like actual people and characters. It's like when you would run into your teacher at the store as a kid and realize, wow, they're not just NPCs that spawn in whenever it's time for you to go to school. They have actual lives. I love seeing Lenora and Berg interacting with each other after getting the 2nd badge. I love seeing Elisa get in contact with Clay to lower the bridge to Driftvale City. I love that you go on a mission with Skyla to help an injured Pokemon on the top of Celestial Tower. I love that even towards the very end of the story, you have to fly all the way back to Nacrene City because Lenora and her museum are still relevant to the plot and she still has a part to play. You want to know what I love most though? At the very end of the game, when you're dashing through the castle and you stumble into a room with 6 of the 7 sages, and you're just like, oh god, do I have to take all of these guys down? And then you see a dialogue box appear with Clay's southern accent, and almost all the gym leaders show up to take on the 7 sages for you so you can continue up the castle to face N. This was one of the coolest moments I have ever experienced in a video game as a kid. I was actually losing my mind. The Unova gym leaders are great, man, oh my gosh. Okay, I know I've been talking about the characters for a while, but I still have to talk about my favorite Pokemon champion, Alder. He's one of those characters where every time he's on screen, I get super hyped and absorb everything he says. Pretty much every champion in Pokemon has this aura of wisdom around them, as you would expect. But Alder in particular just oozes wisdom. This is a guy that's been around, and the music that plays whenever he shows up is just perfection. It goes so hard and fits the vibe of the character so well. His overall aesthetic is great too. He resembles a Native American chief, which is very fitting for a region based off the United States. A Native American chief-inspired champion is such a perfect idea. He even has a Bouffalant on his team, and I don't know if it was intentional, but it's a nice touch. In Black and White 2, he even has a Braviary, which I really think should have been on his team to begin with, since it fits thematically. It's a shame that my favorite champion doesn't end up being the final boss because he's defeated by N in the end, but what they did instead is super cool and different, so I'm not upset about it. The Alder fight is saved for the post-game when you rematch the Pokemon League where you have the true champion battle. 10 out of 10 champion, I love this guy. Oh boy, that was a long section. Hopefully you're finding this interesting so far. The story and characters are some of the most important aspects of this game for me. Even though I play Pokemon games for the gameplay first, the story in Pokemon Black and White is a big reason that they're my favorite. Every time I play these games, it makes me realize that maybe I care a lot more about a Pokemon game's story than I let on. There's a lot more to talk about, so let's keep going. Let's talk about the Unova region itself now. The Unova region is based off the United States, specifically New York City, making it the first region to be based off a real-world location outside of Japan. The region showcases bustling cities, rural countrysides, and most notably, massive bridges. These are the most iconic landmarks of Unova. Everyone remembers their first time crossing Sky Arrow Bridge. There's a tremendous variety of different towns and locations you can discover on your journey. Nacrene City is the artsy city and is literally referred to as the City of Art. The gym is inside the museum, because why wouldn't it be in the City of Art? The city is full of abandoned warehouses from about a century ago, but have since been repurposed into houses and stuff. Castelia City represents the business side of New York. It is by far the biggest city we've seen up to that point in a Pokemon game, and it's kind of a precursor to Lumio City. After crossing the Sky Arrow Bridge in very dramatic fashion, you're met with giant skyscrapers, bustling streets with people rushing to work, and dark alleyways where all sorts of shenanigans likely take place. On the opposite side of things is Nimbasa City. While Castelia City serves as the heart of business, Nimbasa represents leisure and entertainment. Complete with an amusement park, stadium, and theater, it's a very bright and lively place with a bombastic soundtrack. It's always a super exciting city to get to on your journey, and I love the contrast between Castelia and Nimbasa where they represent two completely different aspects of New York and American life in general. Driftville City is another fun one. It's a port town for distributing a variety of goods. It's a lot more calm and understated compared to Nimbasa other than the absolute banger that plays here. One of the most underrated locations in Unova I think is Iceris City, a town with a wet climate and full of windmills. It's a very peaceful place and one I'm always excited to arrive at. Opelucid City is another super cool one, and it changes depending on the version of the game you own. In Pokemon Black, it has a futuristic appearance, while in Pokemon White, it's the opposite with a natural and ancient look. I really like this concept, and I wish more games had differences in towns between versions like this. Next, I want to talk about post-game content because it's extremely important to me when it comes to any series that I'm a huge fan of, and Pokemon is no exception. With how much I love the series, I do not intend on putting the game down after the credits roll. Not to be that guy, but they don't make post-game content in Pokemon games like they used to. Pokemon Black and White has a pretty spectacular post-game. It's not Heart Gold and Soul Silver level. I mean, how can you compete with going to the Kanto region and getting to battle all the gyms? But Pokemon Black and White has what I feel like I could reasonably ask for when it comes to post-games. First off, the Marvelous Bridge opens back up, and you get access to the eastern side of the Unova map. This is the biggest part of a Pokemon postgame for me, or really any game's postgame. Having new locations to explore is so fun. I have so much nostalgia for the Sevi Islands in Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green. It's some of my favorite Pokemon postgame content. As for some of the Black and White locations, you have Black City or White Forest depending on the version you choose, Lacanosa Town, and Undella Town. Undella Town is a beach town where you can sit back, relax, and maybe get your cheeks clapped by Cynthia, but not in a sexy way. I mean in the make you cry like you were just a little kid trying to finish Diamond and Pearl type of way. I remember struggling with the Getsus fight as a kid and thinking afterwards, wow, that was rough. But hey, at least things can't get any worse. But they always do after you say that, don't they? Don't ever say that sentence. Oh man. These things can't get any worse. While you're exploring these new locations, you'll be able to encounter Pokemon from past Pokemon generations. During the course of your journey, you're forced to exclusively use Pokemon that you're not familiar with, which is one of my favorite parts of the game, but getting to reunite with your old favorites once it's all said and done is the perfect way to go about doing it in my opinion. It was always so surreal seeing old Pokemon after only seeing Unova Pokemon for the past 30 hours or so, especially the first time around. Like seriously, getting to the first route and seeing a trainer pull out a Gulpin out of nowhere was an actual jump scare. And then there's the Looker side quest you see in a lot of other games. In this game, he tasks you with rounding up the 7 sages that scattered across Unova after N was defeated. That's pretty much it, I think. I don't really remember it that well. But you know what I do remember? The music. Pokemon Black and White has my favorite soundtrack in the entire series. Everywhere you turn, you'll just find banger after banger, and the music always seems to stitch perfectly together with whatever is happening on screen. I'm gonna try to not just go through and name all my favorite tracks, but I'm probably gonna do it anyway. I'd like to say that I've always liked the Driftville City theme even before it was cool. Okay, maybe it was recognized as a banger even back in the day. I wasn't really paying attention to the community as a kid, but either way, Driftville City was always the track that came to mind first when thinking about the game. I remember when my mom said she would take me to Family Video to rent the game, I would be daydreaming about getting to play the game again, and just thinking of Driftville City's theme was enough to get that butterfly feeling going on in my stomach. Nimbasa's theme is over the top and bombastic, and honestly feels like a good representation of the game as a whole. I already mentioned the theme that plays when Getsus is yapping about Pokemon liberation. It is so ominous and always sent a shiver down my spine as a young lad. N's theme had the same effect on me. It is creepy as hell, but it feels so fitting for a man that is so consumed by his batshit crazy ideals that it's kind of off-putting. The song that plays on Route 10 is one of the most underrated tracks in the game, and is so fitting for where you're at in the story when you first go there. At this point, you just got the final gym badge and are able to challenge the Pokemon League, so you're ready to potentially face N if Alder fails. It's such a majestic sounding track and makes something swell up inside me like, oh yeah, this is the end. It all comes down to this. And then your friends catch up to you and Sharon challenges you to one last battle to make sure you're strong enough to take on N, and it's such a cool moment. But it's also really funny. Like, Sharon, I love you bro, but I have absolutely waxed you in every single battle, so like, how are you testing me? I could keep listing tracks all day. I'm sure you guys have really noteworthy stuff in mind that I didn't even think of. Pokemon is one of those series that never misses with its music, but Black and White somehow goes above and beyond for me. These two games really aren't like the rest for me. Despite still having the same bones as the other Pokemon games, despite still adhering to the core Pokemon formula, they feel so different to me. The formula is exactly the same as it's always been, but adding little twists here and there like using exclusively new Pokemon for the main journey, having characters that go outside the template of traditional rivals and evil team leaders, and having a knockout story that tangles seamlessly with the goal of taking down gym leaders and making it to the Pokemon League, all add up to make the most special Pokemon game I have ever experienced. I'm so glad the perception of these games has turned around over the years since its release. I'm sure that all the love these games have gotten over the past few years have probably made you replay them at some point. If you want to play the games again but don't currently own them, I give you my deepest condolences. Or you could just try stealing. And that's all I have to say, so farewell.